welcome to today's event. I can see that most people are still joining. And I would want to welcome our guests joining us from the rest of Africa to Nairobi virtually. And I see that we are joined by a number of people from Rwanda, Nigeria, Zambia, as well as our friends from Uganda. So we would like to start, and mine is to welcome you and to introduce myself. My name is Evelyn Kimani. I'm the acting CEO of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Kenya branch, and we are hosting you today, and we're very, very excited by this particular conversation on positioning Africa as a global ADR hub and asking ourselves what must be done. So joining us today, we are very privileged to have the leadership of the CIArb across Africa facilitating these events. We have led by our chair, Professor Wayne Mutuma. We have the Africa Trustee. I should have actually just started with the Africa Trustee when it comes to protocol. That is Dr. Chikwendo Madumere. We have the chair of Zambia, Muleba Joseph Tupila. We have the chair emeritus of the Zambia branch, that is Madam Nakasamba Banda. The chair of CIArb Nigeria, Mrs. Olushola, as well as the chairman, the current chair of Rwanda, Amy. So, Chairman, I would want to open the floor to you as the moderator of this event to just welcome the rest of the delegation joining us, and then we can have a few housekeeping before we can then progress to the next area of this agenda.
Madam Evelyn, good afternoon. You may have forgotten to mention the chair of South Africa branch, Hank, is on the call.
Oh, that is my apologies. Yes, the chairman of South African branch, Henk. Is it? I hope I did justice to the name.
Henk Low.
Yes. So before maybe we can proceed, allow me to invite the chairman of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Kenya branch, Professor Wayne Mutuma, to give us his welcome remarks, and then we can proceed to the other aspects of this event. I'm informed that the chairman is experiencing some technical difficulties. Maybe I would invite the Africa Trustee as our leader in Africa to just give some welcome remarks, say hi to your people.
Thank you very much, Madam Evelyn, and thank you so very much to the leadership of the Kenya branch and the leadership of the entire branch of CIArb across Africa. Of course, I can see our chair, as you had mentioned previously. I can see our chair from Rwanda, Mr. Ime. I can see my own chair here in Nigeria, Madam Shola Adewemure. I can see our chair of the South Africa branch, Hank Lu. We met at the Lusaka Arbitration Week in February, last February. And then, of course, I can see our chair emerita of Zambia, Madam Banda. And of course, I can also see the current chair of Zambia, my very good friend, Mr. Mulaba. Yes, I think he's here. I thought I saw him. I believe he has not dropped off yet. So the whole idea for this gathering, as I understand it, is for us to share our thoughts on where we are at the moment and where we want to be going forward. To be able to understand where we are, we must draw lessons from other nations of the world. Of course, the truth of the matter is that in international arbitration, Africa is a late starter. Because when you look at where we are and where other countries are at the moment, of course, you will agree with me that Africa is a late starter. But then all hope is not lost. I mean, a lot of things are going on, and a lot of improvements are going on, and we are collaborating among ourselves, to put Africa on the map where it should be. So this whole conversation, as I understand it, is for us to share our thoughts and then to learn from each other and to position Africa properly, going forward. The arbitrators of the moment, the young members who are coming up, and the institutions of arbitration across Africa. What are the lessons that we should learn from ourselves and from outside of Africa, as a way of positioning Africa as an attractive hub for international arbitration? So that is what this is about. So please feel very free to, give your thoughts, and I'm sure it's going to be very, participatory. Opportunities will be given to everyone to either ask questions or to make contributions, on the different subjects that we'll be discussing today. So those are my opening thoughts, and I'm sure Prof will elaborate a lot more, because I understand he's on the call at the moment. So Prof, I yield to you, sir.
Thank you very much, African trustee. It's also good to have my trustee on board and my wonderful colleagues. I see Chair Rwanda, my good friend Amy, karibu sana, as we say here. I think Africa trustee have also learned some Kiswahili. You are a de facto citizen of this country, although a lot of people have been fighting for you. So really, really good. And I think earlier Shola had joined in. My good friend from Lagos, Chair
Lagos
I
is
don't see her.
greeting you.
Oh, there she is. You are looking very, very, very good on that side.
Lagos is greeting you. Nigeria is greeting you.
Yes, I see the background is beautiful. You're making us want to leave a very cold weather on this side in Nairobi. It's been quite cold on this end.
It's very cold.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
very cold here too. It's been raining for days.
Okay, all right. Okay, so really, really great to see you. I loved the time that we had together in the recently concluded ICC conference. And then I think
Yes.
I'm not sure whether I can see his team present right now. Chair Zambia, congratulations, very big congratulations. We have a new chair from Zambia.
Afternoon, Prof.
Chairman Joseph Muleba. Very good to see you. You have been very hospitable. We have to revenge when you get to to East Africa. We had a lovely, lovely time in Lusaka earlier on in the year. And congratulations, my good sir, on your win. Really super proud that new leadership has come in. And I'm sure you'll take the work that the Emerita Nakasamba had done even further forward. And then we do have, just looking out, just in case I miss anyone. No, I think I have captured everyone. So please, for the benefit of everyone who is joining, not all of them are our members. Some, quite a number of them may not be our members. Allow me just to say something about these esteemed panelists that have joined us. Starting with the Africa trustee, the senior most personality with us here, Dr. Jikwendo Madumere. He's deep in practice in the farm of Madumere and Madumere in Abuja. Has a distinct a distinction, academic distinction, both at master's level and at postgraduate level, with the University of Dundee. More specifically, of course, he wrote very much on the subject of arbitration and the world of energy, petroleum, and the extraction industry. He's our most able trustee, but we don't own him only in Africa. He's also the deputy chair of the Global Trustees Board. And we are very, very thankful. He doesn't deserve much, demand much of an introduction, at least in our part of the world. He brings, of course, significant experience in over 115 arbitration cases. Wow, my good sir, that is quite a number. And it's cutting across both domestic and international arbitration, and in a very, very different contexts: JVAs, energy, mineral extraction, and natural resources. Then we have with us the chair of the Nigeria branch. So honored to have Shola, as she's fondly known by all of us, Mrs. Olusola Adegbon Mire. You know, Shola, with the names from the West, we have to move syllable by syllable, otherwise we'll have our tongues twisted. So it's such an honor to have her. She's the partner of Shola Ajijola and Company, been in practice. So in terms of seniority, she's very much my senior and quite a number of us on this.
But I'm not a professor.
No. Practice seniority is not by book. Seniority is by experience.
I'm waiting to just get to doctor, like Dr. Madume.
No, you are way beyond that. As the audience will hear, she's both a fellow, a chartered arbitrator, an approved tutor and assessor, which tells me there's a lot of work we need to do when it comes to tutoring at all levels of arbitration. I hope our CIArb group is hearing that in Nairobi. So we have someone that we can reach out to when we're running these courses. She's, of course, the chair, as I had mentioned, and she is the co-author of the Nigeria Arbitration Law in Focus. Congratulations on that. More than that, Madam Chair sits on the board of the Kigali International Arbitration Center. Kudos, Amy, you got the best brains to the board on that end with KIAC. She's trained and supported the growth of arbitration for the last 12 years. So she's an accredited mediator with the Center for Effective Dispute Resolution and a member of the panel of neutrals of the Lagos Multi-Door Court, where she arbitrates and mediates. She's also on the Lagos Multi-Door Court training faculty, which runs biannual mediation skills training program. And it's such an honor to have you with us, Madam Chair. So honored to have you with us. Outside that, we are recipients of the Nigeria branch's extraordinary work. I think all of us get the emails. We post quite a number of those emails on our group. They've done a fantastic work when it comes to Islamic finance and dispute resolution. They've introduced a lot of products that we run with, even on our end. They've really been setting the pace and the trend. In-house counsel, very, very good products when it comes to refining the skills when you're rusty, as far as a lot of the pathways we have. And we are really honored to have you with us. So we will mine that wealth quite a lot in the next discussions we have. And then we have, I'm trying to get the quick reference of Chair Zambia. Yeah, we have the Chair Zambia Labor's a quick bio just for reference to all of us. He straddles jurisdictions. He's had exposure not just in his local terrain, but also South Africa and Kenya, where he's done not just at practice level as counsel, but also in the context of disputes. He has extensive experience in the construction industry. and has served as a third-party neutral for CIArb, for AFSA, the Arbitration Foundation of South Africa, and Central and ICC, handling very complex high-value disputes. He's empaneled in LIAC, as we popularly refer to it, the Lusaka is often as a sole or co-arbitrator, and is a FCArb fellow with unique expertise in matters taxation, having studied at the University of Pretoria, where he did his master's, and at the Africa International Arbitration. So it's such an honor. We have a panel. I will assure all the those that have joined us that you are going to have the richest of knowledge resources coming from across the African continent. And like the Africa trustee mentioned, we are talking about how to position this continent as a global ADR hub. So the history of Africa has been one of division and partition. We are now asking the question that's on everyone's lips. How do you take Africa as a whole, position it as an ADR hub? And I'd like to open the first round of conversations to all the panelists, and just to get out of them and their perspectives on this topic from your specific jurisdiction. Africa Trustee, I think you'll speak very broadly, given your overall pulse of what happens in various jurisdictions. But I'd like to ask this question with the topic at hand. What's your perspective from Nigeria? We'll start with Chair, Madam Shola. Welcome, as we say in this part of the world. Your quick opening remarks. Thank you.
To be physical, and that I was in Nairobi. But this is a very interesting topic, very important topic. You know, what's happening? How do we develop Africa? And of course, there are so many things that we need to do. There's so many things that we need to talk about. Why are people still spending so much money choosing foreign seats when we can be doing all these things in Africa? And I mean, there are quite a good places in Africa where we can do what has to be done. So what do we have to do? There's so many things I think that we have to fix. Yes, I think there are things that we need to fix. I'm here now. I've had to reconnect about 3 or 4 times. Prof, you couldn't get on time because of connection issues, infrastructure. These are the most basic things. I mean, there are more serious things. These are the most basic things. And so if we're still having problems with these very basic things, how do we start dealing with the big ones? I mean, how do we want to have an arbitration based in Africa? It's hybrid. I mean, we have arbitrations like that in Nigeria. I had one in Abuja, you know, some time back. One or two of the parties were joining us from abroad, but it was such a difficult thing. You know, people going on and off, and that gives parties who are not there the opportunity to get up to a lot of things that they would normally not be able to get up to if all of us were in the same room. And so there are a lot of protocols. I say a lot of protocols concerning virtual meetings. A lot of those protocols can't just work. They can't work because here you have somebody saying, look, I have to switch off my video so that my audio can be a little bit better. And once you switch off your video, I don't know, the arbitrator does not know what you are doing. So there are just some basic things that, let's start with getting the basics right. You know, let's start with the basics. And then, of course, there are other things we will talk about during this webinar. There are things I want to talk about. Why do people go abroad when they can do it in Africa? I think we'll talk about, if just as an opening, I think that we have to start with getting the basics right. I mean, I would have thought this was a Nigerian problem, but I mean, you couldn't get on as well. And you're far away in Nairobi. So it's not about Nigeria. Anytime while I'm talking, I could just go off. I've gone off, like I said, 4 or 5 times since I logged on about maybe 10 minutes to 12. So where are we going? So I'll just stop there. And then, I have a lot of things I want to say about bigger problems. Thank you. That's just my intro.
So it's such a pity that our delay found up and reinforced your point that let's get the basics right in the first place. How can we talk about being an attractive destination and a hub when we are all struggling to join? And what are your thoughts from Zambia? Just a quick opening statement, Chair Muleba. What are your thoughts? When you hear this topic, when you think about this being a hub, before we conclude with the Africa Trustee, I digress, by the way. I just to check in whether Emerita Chair is present, Nakasamba, just checking. For some reason, I was under the impression she would also join us, but okay, she isn't here. So what are your thoughts? Did you have any difficulty joining in Chair Zambia to make this make this point overemphasized?
No, I had seamless joining, so that was fine on my end. But first thing first, I'm happy to be on board to speak to our audience here and to share the perspectives from Zambia. Given the angle that Chair Nigeria has taken us on, I would like us, at least from the Zambia point of view, just to highlight a different side of things in terms of Africa being a hub, perhaps focusing on the slightly good side. Obviously, we'll get more into this as we go deeper into it. But at least from the Zambia side, I would like to highlight that the ADR field, the ADR sector, it's, it has its gaps here and there, but overall I'd classify it as healthy and growing. And healthy and growing could be, it ranges. When we say healthy and growing, for instance, we've made some significant gains over the last few years, say with our judiciary. You can't talk about the gains in our ADR space without giving credit to our judiciary. Over the last few years, we've seen pro-arbitration decisions. We've seen our jurisprudence grow around the area of ADR, for instance, arbitral awards. When can they be challenged? They're very limited grounds. So the judiciary has been very supportive around that. I think that's something to quickly highlight from the Zambia space. I think it's very important because that's one of our gains. And generally, it's been healthy in the sense that over the years, we've seen an uptake of ADR. And that, it stretches from both the arbitration, mediation, and even of construction adjudication. So the sectors, the players, the parties, there's a little more awareness of, are there options to our traditional means of dispute resolution? Are these options effective? Are they attractive? And year on year, we've seen them growing. Again, for example, our judiciary has this annual mediation week. That's aimed at highlighting mediation, bring it more to the fore, see how it can help with our dispute resolution processes. So my opening remarks would be that in Zambia, it's healthy and growing. Yes, there are some gaps here and there. We'll discuss them as we go along, but I would say healthy and growing with a very supportive judiciary. That would be the opening shot for now.
Okay, so some positive news. There is progress.
Yep.
Judiciary that is waking up to an understanding of the role it plays within the larger ecosystem in terms of enforcement decisions, a judiciary also that is characterizing itself with events that are very much ADRs. So it sounds like good news coming up from the South.
And Prof, and if I may just add, again, in addition to this healthy and growing, not only do we have our usual training for our practitioners, the normal, say, legal practitioners, engineers, but we even have our judiciary as well actively undertaking the CIArb courses. So that's how pro-arbitration there and how much gain we're making in the judiciary, which is, again, very good steps. So healthy and growing.
Okay, so that's good. It's good to get both sides of the perspective. Chairs, Nigeria had told us we are struggling with some basics. Chair Zambia says, but there are certain things that we're getting right. What does it look like from your end, Chair Rwanda branch, Amy? How does it look like from your end? Your opening remarks on this idea of making Africa a hub, a dispute resolution hub. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Prof. On our side, I think we share a lot. We share the challenges, as highlighted by Shola, but also we share the gains as we can see them. So it's not really a blackout. There is no blackout, I can say. So there are lights here and there. In Rwanda, on the ADR as general, particularly on arbitration, I can say that we have made a very big progress, which is we have been through changes here, being institutional, being in the way Rwanda is positioning itself globally, I can say, which pushes also the judiciary and even the practice of law in global, not leaving the ADR, which is the focus of our discussion today. By way of illustration, Rwanda has been promoting ADR, and we have seen using the court annex mediation that we have today, from 2022, just 3 years back, 2023 to 2026, we have a record of more than 35 court cases resolved through court annex mediation. That's a small example of what is being done by the judiciary on that level, promoting ADR with a new ADR policy. Rwanda has an ADR center today. There is a work being done on reviewing the Arbitration Act, because we consider the one we have today to be outdated. So there is massive changes. Rwanda has been promoting grassroots strategies like Gachacha, the Abunzi system, which is there, and a lot is being done. So I can say we have a mix. We have this going forward move, but we still have some gaps. Maybe we will be discussing about them, because people who have been very first in litigation, sometimes there is some reluctance. This is one of the challenges, practitioners being really, you can see them relying on litigation mostly than the way we are bringing them to the ADR and its practice and whatever. So also on another side, we can talk about this technology and infrastructure. Okay, we are okay. In Rwanda, we have good internet and whatever, but we are not at the level we desire. So we know we are still behind, and we are doing our best to reach the best. So it's work in progress, and I think this we share with all the jury. Thank you.
We have a running joke with the Africa Trustee when it comes to our digital infrastructure. And he often laments that we are not where we should be in Kenya. I saw him smiling quite a lot when he was hearing Amy saying that thankfully I'm on the call and I can be heard. Of course, what Amy does, he says, talks about policy and legal reform, a lot of the work that's happening in Rwanda. He talks about centers that are being established by the executive that are very cognizant of the primary role that ADR will play. But not just in the future, I think Rwanda offers us one of the most sterling examples that disputes have not always been within the formal court system. So he made reference to the famous Gacaca courts, a legacy I think Rwanda is passed to the rest of Africa in terms of claiming its space with other mechanisms outside the formal justice system. I want to bring in the trustee at this point because he will give us an aerial perspective. The topic at hand, in terms of your opening remarks, trustee, do we have the equivalent of a successful ecosystem to be a hub? Is it possible to construct that ecosystem as a continent? Or are these 54 plus countries not just, it's a difficult one to pass through when we talk about Africa as a hub, as an ADR hub. Welcome, Doc.
Okay, so thank you very much, Prof, for putting this together, and also thank you to the entire ESCO of our branch in Kenya, and thank you for having me this morning or this afternoon. So let me start by re-echoing my statement 2 years ago in Kenya during the 40th annual conference of CIArb in Kenya. When I was given the opportunity to make my to give my speech, I said something, on that day. I said, if we walk backwards 40 years ago, and we imagine where we were as a continent, and then we compare to where we are today, there is no dispute about it that we have made a lot of progress in Africa. And I see that all over the continent. Of course, I'm not blind to the fact that there are gaps like mentioned by Madam Shola and also recognized by both Mulaba and Eme. But we have, as a matter of fact, made a lot of progress in terms of laws, in terms of expertise, in terms of institutions, in terms of support of judiciary, in terms of strong policy supporting ADR and arbitration. Africa has made a lot of, progress. And I see that all across Africa. If you look at the vibrancy of our young members and the expertise they bring to the table, you will recognize that Africa has made a lot of progress. And of course we have room for improvement in terms of infrastructure, like mentioned by Madam Shola. I share her struggles. But interestingly, I'm also in Nigeria and I joined from Abuja, and my journey has been seamless. And I've not had any problems, since I joined. So technology can fail. It's not peculiar to Africa, but I recognize the fact that Africa is on the rise in terms of ADR. Thank you very much, sir.
So technology can fail. It is not an indicator that there's something wrong in terms of the continent. But allow me to ask a follow-up question on that. Do we have, trustees, some kind of code that could be construed as an ecosystem in prosecuting this thought of Africa as an ADR hub? Is there something across the continent? And here I'm thinking about the geopolitical space. I see we have been joined by Senior Counsel John Ohaga, who was recently appointed to the panel of arbitrators, I think the London Court of International Arbitration. And I'm thinking of what is happening around the world and whether there's a space now because of that for Africa in a very unique manner. Yes, trustee.
Okay, so thank you very much, Prof. Now, you will remember, Prof, and most of us on this call will remember also that one of the highlights of the centenary celebration of CIArb was the publication of what they call the London Principles for the establishment of safe seats in international arbitration. And those principles remain extant even till now. And if you look through those, principles, it talks about, supportive laws, which you have in Africa. It talks about supportive judiciary, which is improving in Africa. It talks about expertise, which is also improving. It talks about infrastructure, which is the point that Madam Shola made, is also improving. So Africa, and then you can only look to improve by looking at what other nations have done. Prof, 20 years ago, Singapore was a non-starter in international arbitration. Hong Kong was a non-starter in international arbitration. Today, Singapore competes with London in terms of attractiveness, as a seat. Hong Kong competes. What have they done correctly? What have they done that changed the trajectory of those countries? Those are things we should be looking at. Africa has to be intentional about positioning, and I see that happening across Africa. Here in Nigeria, we passed a new arbitration law in 2023. As at this year, there's already a committee set up by government to review that law, to improve that law a lot more. I understand also that such a force is also going on in Kenya. Something also is happening in Zambia. So I think we are moving, in the right direction in Africa. And what I can recommend to us is look at the London Principles and then look at the examples of other countries that have gone ahead of us. Singapore, for instance, Hong Kong, for instance. What have they done differently that has made them competitive in the world of international arbitration? Thank you, sir.
I think that really sums it up, Trustee. What have they done right? Is there something that we can learn, or possibly what are we doing wrong? Which brings me, I think, to the mirror of that conversation. Chair Nigeria, Madam Shola, what are we doing wrong? Where are we missing it? Are there certain key barriers? Why do we continue to insert now contracts those seats, London, Paris, Dubai, Singapore? Where is the problem? What are the impediments? Welcome, Chair.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting because, this question has actually had answers, but also we have answered it as a government. Let me say, as a government. So Dr. Madumere talked about a new ADR law, not so new, but also we also have an ADR policy. And I will first of all answer this question, even from the ADR policy. What are we doing wrong? And then how are we trying to correct it? So our ADR policy, which is 2024, in paragraph 13.0, the heading is Seat and Venue of Arbitration. It says currently, almost all arbitration cases to which Nigeria is a party have the seat and venue of arbitration outside the country. This is an official document, and this is paragraph 13.0. Due to challenges like lack of adequate infrastructure, international patronage, enforcement issues, perception, publicity, etc. Given the current efforts at reforming the justice sector, therefore, preference of Nigeria as the seat and venue of arbitration will encourage investment, drive economic development, as well as improve arbitration and ADR practices and culture amongst arbitrators, ADR, and other relevant professionals in Nigeria. So the policy already says one of the things that is wrong is lack of adequate infrastructure. Even though I called it a small thing, a basic thing, but for it to end up in a policy like this, a federal government policy, it shows us that it is actually not a small thing. international patronage, enforcement issues, perception. What do people think about Nigeria, about African seats? And so we need to do something about it. That's the beginning, that these are some of the challenges as recognized. And I mean, if you take your time, go online, look for the national ADR policy, you find that the people who are signatories to this ADR policy, including the Attorney General of the Federation and the whole team, they are all very well established arbitrators, some of them international arbitrators. You know, the Attorney General at that time was a past chair of the Ibadan chapter of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Nigerian branch. So these are people who understand, and they have said these are the challenges. But then they did not just stop at talking about challenges. They then went on to look at what can we do about it. I don't know if I have the time to just quickly read it. Prof, can I do that? Thank you. It says to achieve the foregoing. And for me, as it is in Nigeria, so will it work in Africa. There may be some objections to some of these things, but at least we're trying. Just like Dr. Madumere said, we have to keep trying to get better. We have to see what other people have done. And then it says to achieve the foregoing, the government and private institutions commit to A, preference of the seat and venue of arbitration to be in Nigeria. So at some point, we also have to look at choosing our own place if we can. You know, I'm not standing that it must be, because arbitration is party autonomy. So you can't really force anybody, but preferred seat and venue to be in Nigeria, stipulate Nigeria as the seat and venue of all arbitrations involving Nigeria's governmental bodies, with regional center for international and commercial arbitration as the default appointer where necessary, where cases are within a particular monetary threshold involving state government agencies. Such cases should undergo ADR at the MDCs. The MDCs are the multi-dock courthouses. And I think somebody had talked about the multi-dock courts. The Federal Ministry of Justice, here Justice, the FMOJ, but that's the Federal Ministry of Justice, shall issue guidelines from time to time with regards to the thresholds, and private sector entities are encouraged, and that's the word, they cannot be compelled, are encouraged to utilize ADR in the first instance at the multi-dock courthouses and other government ADR centers. And the government shall encourage the judiciary to establish special courts. These are also very, very key things that other people are doing that are making their countries to be arbitration friendly. And so they're looking that, okay, we'll encourage the judiciary. That's one thing you can't force, but at least encourage the judiciary to establish special courts, including small claims commercial courts and specialized divisions of the judiciary, as well as the expansion and strengthening of ADR centers in order to promote fair and expeditious resolution of commercial disputes, reduce delays, and encourage the development of suitable skills and specializations. All these things are the things that we need to look at that other people are doing right. Technology has become a big thing. So they're talking about, this includes electronic filing, program for retraining and reorientation of the judiciary. And I'm happy to say the CIArb has been at the forefront of this for many years now, i.e. retraining and reorientation of the judiciary on the importance of creating an enabling business environment and other good and tested practices for speeding up trial of commercial cases in line with theme 17 of the National Policy on Justice 2024. So this just goes to show us the things that are wrong and the things we can do to make it better. Maybe not to make it right, but because we have to keep getting better. The people we're looking at are also not stopping where they are. Every jurisdiction, every state, every country is still going further and further. COVID even pushed a lot of people forward, you know, and I think that we have to do so as well. But these things that even some people came together and created a national ADR policy and pushed all these things forward, some may work, some may not work, but at least, you know, like Doctor said, at least we're moving forward. So we see, you know, even without me adding anything, we see challenges, but we see some commitment to how we can get better, you know, because we've heard of things that people are doing to get better, problems, But these problems are all recognized by even our national ADR policy. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I think what I find very interesting, Shola, with what you've said is, so we have all of these things going forward. So we've got policy. I mean, the vast number of African states are members of the New York Convention. We have a law reform happening, but this infrastructure seems to keep popping up, and the question of perception. What do you think every time you are about to put an African country as a seat? And I'd like to bring in the trustee here. Doc, it's all about trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I really, I have to ask, are we, this conversation or puts us in a way in a paradox. On one hand, I think there are those who feel we're not getting a fair right to be on the table. And then, of course, there's what you've had Shopla say. There are all these perceptions. So what more can we do to make parties trust an African arbitral institution? I think that's what it comes to. I know you'd mentioned the London principles, but where will that leave us? Welcome, Doc.
Okay. So thank you very much, Prof. There was a research conducted, in London by the University of London in collaboration with the Price Waterhouse, and users of the international arbitration were asked the same question: what do you consider most as the key attraction for international arbitration, and key attraction for choosing a seat? And they all talked about, number one, enforceability of the outcome of the arbitration, and number two, finality of the outcome. So if we use that as a base, what we must do in Africa, I was invited to speak, I think last month or last 2 months or so, by the committee set up by the Federal Attorney General here in Nigeria, on what we should do to amend our arbitration law. And I told them pointedly, which is also what I'm going to say here, the key difference, the key change that we must make in our law, both in Nigeria and across Africa, is to ensure that we get enforcement regimes right. We get enforcement. People spend money to get an award, and then lawyers begin to litigate the outcome of that arbitration up to Supreme Court, and it takes over 20 years. I published an award 5 years ago. The award was taken up to Supreme Court. Supreme Court affirmed the award. Up to today, that award has not been enforced. And that award is reported in our Nigerian law reports. That is the last judgment that one Justice Roosevelt gave before he retired from the Supreme Court. Once we get enforcement correct in our law and implementation, there will be a boom in arbitration in Africa. Africa will be a lot more attractive. And that is where we must solicit the support of the judiciary. Judiciary has a key role to play in promoting Africa as an attractive hub for international commercial arbitration. Mm-hmm. And the question I ask always is, it's not a very good example, but I'm going to mention it. The P&ID case in London. If the seat was in Nigeria, is there a possibility that the outcome in court could have been the same outcome we had in London? Mm-hmm. Both in terms of speed of completion and in terms of result of the outcome. Is there a possibility? That is something we should reflect on as Africans. That's why I started by saying that we must be intentional in the things we do, both from the government side in terms of policy and in terms of law, and then from the institutional side also. Arbitration, I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to talk about that. Arbitration is a private sector driven mechanism. our institutions in Africa must be private sector, must be driven by private sector. For as long as they remain like appendages of government, people are not going to trust Africa. And like was said earlier on, arbitration is the fundamental principle is principle of party autonomy. People negotiate contracts and they negotiate where to sit the arbitration. The investor who is bringing the money by way of private capital must ensure that if dispute arises, he will resolve dispute in a forum that gives him benefit of neutrality and gives him benefit of finality. Can we provide that in Africa? Those are critical questions we must ask ourselves. But also a lot of improvement is being made from Nigeria to Kenya to Zambia to all across Africa. They're all getting very, very supportive. So that's why I said we are getting better. And of course, I take the point that government recognizes that there are challenges and government is doing something to put right. But it mustn't be, for instance, in the law, in the policy that Madam Shola referred to. That policy was influenced essentially as a reaction to PNID. And it was, and I'm not sure a lot of thought was given to a lot of things written in there. It was we can't make progress by being emotional. We must give careful thought to every step we are taking.
Arbitration, but we're lacking a bit in terms of the capacity or the gap in terms of these specific trainings. So in the construction field, do we have sufficient arbitrators? This could be arbitrators, could be practitioners as well, party representatives who are specifically trained in construction disputes. Because as you can imagine, the construction industry, construction disputes are slightly different from the normal commercial or the services industry disputes. Those are slightly more complex. And that argument again stretches for the energy sector. Do we have enough expertise around those particular sectors? So overall, we do have capacity, we've built around it, but I think there are slowly more emerging smaller sectors where we need to build additional capacity. Then obviously the next question you'd ask is how do we build this additional capacity? Obviously, again, I'll keep harping about CIArb because that's our training leg of the branch across the continent. So the branch does have trainings on construction and education, right? So that helps us build capacity towards the construction sector. But then, especially, when you talk about ADR as a hub, Africa, trying to get into the ADR hub and making headway globally, we need to be able to compete internationally. And when you look at it internationally, our colleagues, and I'll call them competitors, in Europe, Asia, these are the specific trainings they've undertaken year on year. So when you look at their arbitral institutions, you look at the law firms, and when they set out their capacity, their expertise, you notice that they've undertaken trainings. These could be master's degrees in the energy sector, diplomas in construction and education, in construction law. So these are some of the things we definitely need to work at. So we definitely need our practitioners, arbitrators, making day-by steps to target these new growing areas, develop capacity there, as well as upskilling. So you could have done your arbitration training, your practice years back, but then you always need to continuously upskill and upgrade. So do we have capacity? I would say generally yes, but I would like to see this capacity more developed and target the more specific sectors. And again, just for, if you look at what's going on globally, the wars, I saw my colleague the other day, Charles, yesterday, was talking about the heat wave in London. That has triggered the requirement for air cons, which triggers critical minerals in Africa. So, it's going back the same thing. We're developing more and more smaller specific fields where disputes will definitely arise. And then because of that, we also need to have expertise in those smaller bits and pieces of fields. Otherwise, when the disputes arise in these smaller fields, critical energy, critical minerals, they'll always go to the people who are seen as having expertise. And maybe perhaps we don't have that yet, but we need to start building towards it. I think there was a bit you had mentioned in terms of how do we avoid the problems and the next generation as well. So obviously one part is the training. The other part, which I'm also, quite passionate about, is are we taking steps to train the next pipeline of arbitrators, practitioners coming along? How are we developing their capacity? So I know it will be a bit touched upon by our previous past chair when she joins, but for example, what have we taken in terms of mentorship steps for the groups coming behind us? Are we encouraging their development? Are they being given enough training and support? So I won't touch too much on that because chairs going to come back on that. But overall, I'd say, do we have capacity generally? Yes, but I think this capacity needs to now be more developed into the smaller bits and pieces of emerging areas. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Muleba. I don't know whether Emerita Chair Nakasamba has joined us. I just
She dropped, and I think she dropped and
she's 1 hour behind. I have a direct at Shola. Is this a mutually exclusive thought that we essentially don't have capacity in terms of very specialized areas, and that is why we don't have a lot of African arbitrators featuring in appointments from other seats. For example, there is a research that's been done by Professor Emilia on this, which is widely broadcasted. Or are there other factors that we need to then representation of people from different jurisdictions to get us on that table? I think this is one conversation that continues. It sometimes goes up and goes underneath the water. What are your thoughts on this, Shola?
Of course, we may not have enough. We can't compare where we are to where other countries were, let's say, even 20 years ago. So, I mean, it's like a race. Some people started very early and they're in front. But we started late, but we're getting there. We may not have as many, but we do have them. I think we may not have in every area, but we're getting there. We have very, very good international arbitrators. We have arbitrators who sit on ICSID panels, on different types of FDI panels, ICC, and who are doing good work. They're really doing very well. We need more, no doubt. And then even those ones, we need to find a way to project them the more. So you find out that I think I was reading about maybe 3 female older arbitrators who are doing so much of the work in one of the institutes, one of the international institutes. It's not that we don't have people who can do those things, but also we need to project them. They have the capacity to do it. It's another thing for people to know that you have the capacity and that you can do it. We also need to project. We can appoint them. Let us appoint them. I know that we have a lot of work to do. I know that our own Africans, we still need to build capacity. There's no doubt we need to. But even those who are already there, who have built the capacity, are they getting that much exposure? Are they getting that much visibility? I don't think so. And so we need to do something about how do our own people get visibility? How do they get exposure? We have a lot of brilliant people who are experienced in so many areas. They are professors, and they may not even be professors, but they are good in those areas. But then how many people know about them? How do they get visibility? How do they get the exposure? I find young people abroad, young arbitrators, they've either because of the training they've got, experience, they've worked with, bigger arbitrators, they've been mentored very well. How do they get the visibility and the exposure? For me, that is a very big question. It's not that we don't have them, we have them.
And it's a big question indeed. Maybe if we were to
move the lens from the global perspective to continental perspective. Are we, if we were to really take that,
start talking about international and global, you know, how space, and that's true. How much of visibility are we even getting within our own space? How many Kenyans have sat in arbitrations in Nigeria, in the what can we do? Let's ask ourselves, what can we do? How can we really integrate ourselves and work with each other? You know, how can we do that? It's very important. So before we stage, are we playing on the continental stage? And I know we have a lot of brilliant people who can do these things, but how do we get the visibility? How do we get the exposure? How do we get people to know? There are a few people who are quite well known. I mean, you mentioned Emilia. She's done a lot of work. Dr. Chikwendu, because it's trustee for African, you know, a few other people like that, you know, and I could mention quite a few people. But there are so many people that are not known and who are very brilliant and who should be on the continental and on the international global stage as well. So how do we push them? How do we make sure they're appointed? You know, it bothers me. I mean, as chairs of the various jurisdictions of African branches, we are also in a position to do that. How much of that are we doing ourselves? Because I know that many chairs are making appointments. That is one thing we can make appointments. People are making appointments everywhere. How do we give more visibility to our own people? It's a question, or maybe we are the ones who are not making ourselves visible enough. Maybe there's work we need to do as individuals to make ourselves more visible. Recently, I know Dr. Madumere spoke on a panel about getting, Dr. Madumere, was it getting international arbitration or just getting arbitration? I cannot remember if it was about getting arbitration or getting international arbitration. But a lot of it was about making ourselves visible enough to get these appointments.
Amy, would you like to add to that? Because I know Kigali International Arbitration Center has taken a particular approach towards making sure that that visibility and a lot of the conduct of references from that region are in the hands of competent African arbitrators. Any
Thank you,
words,
Dr.
maybe in addition?
Professor. I really adhere to what is being said, but I'm seeing this discussion beyond what I can call human capacity, beyond the people, beyond what Prof. Kenneth can bring in, what Shola can bring in, what Teme can bring in. Within Africa, we still have issues maybe that can be said as constraints, since I find that comparing my country, Rwanda, to other jurisdictions, we still have countries that are closed, really closed. And on some instances, it's very difficult to travel across Africa than to go out of Africa. So you can locate a good arbitrator. Let's say KIAC can find a good arbitrator, but if, let's say, I know we have, maybe we'll talk also about that. We are improving on technology and doing these online online hearings and whatever. But if someone has to travel, coming from Rwanda, let's say, to Nigeria, it's not easy. Going from the north to the south, from the west to the east, through Africa is not easy. So beyond the human capacity that we are talking about, the arbitrators' capacity as individuals, we have to also to look to the institutional and political capacity that we need to raise in our continent. We need to work on that. The visa issues, the flight issues. So people can be there, they are able to offer, but the way they could be doing it throughout the continent is a bit difficult. Taking the lesson from Rwanda, Rwanda is now open to all Africans. You just take your passport and you come, and you have a stay. Think about Ivory Coast or another country. So this also is a challenge and is a constraint that I wanted to bring in, but I do agree with whatever has been said by the colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. The idea of harmonizing the continent brings to the fore the whole conversation around the CFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the opportunities that it presents. Cross-border trade, we've always talked about the potential. Let me ask Muleba probably to step in here just to reiterate and sort of speak about those opportunities, but more importantly, what that means for African arbitral institutions, African practitioners. Yes, welcome, Muleba.
Thanks, Prof. So again, the African Continental Free Trade Area. Obviously, you can't have this discussion without just a brief understanding of what is it doing for us overall. And the goal being that it's essentially opening up trade across the continent. So this should allow us to freely trade services, goods, and just generally boost trade across the continent. And naturally, with all things, when you have increased trade, disputes will arise. And I think that's where the opportunities then begin to pop up for us as institutional arbitral institutions, practitioners, as well as party representatives. The first one, and slightly because we've touched on it as speakers previously, is that it gives us the opportunity to localize our disputes, right? And when we say localize in this context, previously we said this, the disputes have been going to London, Paris, Singapore, but now we have an opportunity. This is going to be intra-trade, trade amongst ourselves, disputes arising amongst ourselves, the countries amongst ourselves. So now we have the perfect opportunity to use our African institutions for the dispute resolution. So again, from the top of my head, in the Southern African region, we have the Arbitration Foundation of Southern Africa. I mean, back home here, we have Lusaka International Arbitration Center. Malawi has a center now. We start moving up towards, the east. There's the Kigali International Arbitration Center. Nairobi, there's the Lagos Chamber of Commerce International Arbitration Center. There's the one in Cairo. So this gives us now the opportunity to properly use our institutions. And, like I said, we've obviously been complaining, but now here we are. The disputes will be around us in Africa. So let's use our institutions. So the first opportunity I think it gives us is to use our institutions. But then related to this, that it gives us the opportunity to use the institutions and our seats. Because again, in the past, sometimes we had a bit of those institutions where the seats were in London, but maybe you're using an institution here. But now I think we have the opportunity to properly house everything here. The institution localized, the seat localized, and then naturally, it means if we use our seats here, we're using the jurisdictions here when it comes to enforcement, any procedural issues. And over a period of time, we keep saying Africa is a late starter. So here we have an opportunity to use our seats, use our institutions, and then over the number of years, we're going to build our capacity. We're going to strengthen the institutions. We're going to give the institutions a reputation, right? Because remember, these won't be small disputes. It could be larger larger ticket disputes. And the larger they are, the more complex, the more publicity we'll get, the more reputation we'll develop for institutions. So I think that's probably the biggest opportunity we have here, is that it gives us a case to use our institutions, showcase them, and bring them to the fore. So I think that's very big. And I have this as a comment as well. Aimee has touched on it. Theoretically, it should give us an opportunity to have more cost-effective arbitrations, given that we'll be within the continent. Obviously, I know there's that caveat of travel and visas, which always affects it, but theoretically, it should then become cheaper, that I should be able to travel within the continent as opposed to having to travel, across continents to Europe, Asia, and whatnot. And then also from a financial point of view, we're keeping the money within the continent. We're going to pay the arbitrators. Hopefully, there'll be arbitrators from the continent here, the practitioners, or using the institutions here. So it also helps in that context as well, that keeping everything localized. But then, in as much as we now have this opportunity to use our local institutions, I'll call them African institutions, there's a question, Prof, of have we positioned these institutions for what is coming now? Are they ready for the disputes? Will they be the capacity to deal with them? And I'm sure the rest of the speakers will come in and speak on this. But what I then look at is, are our institutions, do they have the infrastructure, right? So I've had recent opportunity to have a look at the London Court of International Arbitration, the Singapore one, I think the one in Dubai. We need that type of infrastructure, and when we talk of infrastructure, and I think Chair and I just spoke on it, it's these small bits and pieces, which on the face of it, you may not think are major. But when I've also interacted with colleagues, say from White and Case, these are some of the things they look at when they want to choose perhaps or consider a center in Africa. So they'll ask, do you have, and it sounds very small. They'll ask, do you have hearing rooms? We want to see your hearing rooms. Do you have enough seating in your hearing rooms? Do you have the international standards of connectivity? Are we able to properly connect to a witness in Dubai whilst we're seated here physically seated in Africa, say Lusaka? It's those small bits and pieces which look small, but they are big. So for instance, our institutions, are they ready for transcribers? Like we have, for example, language transcription. So let's say the dispute is between Kenya and Zambia. We will be able to have live transcription into our African languages, or it could be English and French. Do we have those live transcriptions ready available for us? Do we have that capacity? So also, for example, the next question to ask is, do our institutions have the personnel? So for example, you find when you're doing an ICC arbitration, you have a case manager attached to your dispute who will be available to you throughout the proceedings. These are questions we have to ask ourselves as African institutions as this opportunity now comes to us. Is our centers, are they ready to assign case managers who will then be attached with the dispute from start to finish, who will be available for us? Again, these are smaller bits and pieces that supposedly the nations or the people who are ahead of us look to and think you must have, to satisfy. And then related to that, still on the institutions, is do our institutions have strong panels? Okay, so the opportunity has come to house our disputes locally. So now we also need to build up our expertise on the panels. So as we set up our panels, do our panels, or should we be looking to our panels who have expertise? Energy, infrastructure, institutions. Let's build up the transparency as well. It's always good to be able to say, I know how the Kigali Center appoints the arbitrators. It shouldn't be a crowd where we don't know how arbitrators are appointed or how matters move along the chain. let's get to a point where our institutions openly have this information in terms of this is how you appoint your arbitrators, these are the arbitrators available to you. And it also helps just with building the reputation and the publicity of our institutions. And then lastly is on efficiency. You see, if you look at the ICC, they've had a few of their changes around their rules to allow for quicker resolution of disputes depending on the values and the thresholds. So these are some of the things I think our institutions who have an opportunity through this free trade area can we also change some of those things? So if there's a low ticket value dispute, are we able to have rules? Are these specific centers, institutions able to have rules that will allow us resolve these disputes quicker? Because now this all comes back to efficiency, transparency, reputation, then it builds up the ADR hub. If I'm able to say, look, in Kigali, they have transparency, they have efficiency, they have the panel, they have the institutions, more and more will keep coming back to these institutions. And like I keep saying, if we use them internally, that over time we'll have the reputation, the institutions will be there, and then it will basically be a better hub. More and more people will be coming in. It keeps going back to the sentence of other regions started before us, but we have the opportunity to use our institutions now and then start going and building up the capacity around that. So I'll leave it at that and then hear from the other speakers and others just chip in more where needed.
Thank you very much, Muleba, for that. A follow-up question to the trustee. So of course, we have the centers. There have been quite a number of centers now that we enjoy. It's a local ownership of our dispute resolution process. So that's a good thing, I would imagine. But there's been a parallel discussion around that, the proliferation of centers. Trustees, is this a good thing? And I ask this question in light of your opening remarks, that what is at play here is a dispute resolution question. It's a business strategy question. When you have all these centers, are there prospects for strategic partnerships around many of the aspects that Muleba had just mentioned? Are they economically viable? Is it possible to think about the topic we're having through possible strategic partnerships running across through the centers? What are your thoughts, Doc?
Okay, so thank you very much, Prof. But please, you would permit me to take the liberty of this time to, give my thoughts on some of the things that we've discussed previously with regards to making Africa an attractive hub. One point we should also keep in mind is the right of parties in international arbitration to have lawyers of their choice. In Nigeria, for instance, our Legal Practitioners Act says that if you must practice as a lawyer in Nigeria, you must be a legal practitioner called to the bar in Nigeria. I don't know if that also happens in Kenya or in Zambia, but you could go to London or France or New York and represent a client in international arbitration without being called to the bar there. So parties in those jurisdictions have the choice, have the right to elect, to appoint anybody of their choice to be their legal representative. That is something we should think about also in Africa. Arbitration runs on the principle of party autonomy. Some people say that under our new arbitration law now, that parties can actually appoint anybody that they want as their lawyer. Well, we look to see how that works. Now, with regards to appointment, which is also the point you asked pointedly to the chair of our branch here in Nigeria, that is something as chairs of the branches of CIArb, you must take very seriously. We cannot be talking about we not being appointed internationally, whereas we don't appoint ourselves within Africa. And in that regard, I think Kenya has done so very well. I'm also aware that Nigeria branch some years ago appointed somebody from Kenya into an ICC arbitration. I'm aware because I was one of the lawyers to the respondent in that matter, and the arbitrator was a Kenyan, and he was appointed by the Nigeria branch here. So that's something we should do a lot more among ourselves. There should be Kenya arbitrators appointed by Nigeria. There should be Kenya arbitrators appointed by Zambia, and vice versa across Africa. That is something we must do to promote ourselves and to give ourselves leverage, as we begin to, ask for more outside of Africa. Now, with regards to infrastructure, just to make a point, an answer to what Mulaba said with regards to transcription and all that. If you have institutions who are properly set up, these things are not rocket science. There are facilities now that you can use to provide transcription. I was involved in an investment arbitration, and it was Opus 2 that we used. And these are things that centers can actually, install, for themselves. So that shouldn't be a reason why we cannot make Africa, an attractive hub for international arbitration. And then with regards to AFTA, I had a conversation with our late chair of Kenya, Chair Emeritus, Willie. Willie had discussed something with me with regards to how we can leverage on AFTA to promote African arbitration. And I think that is something, Prof, you should also think about. If you look at the AFTA protocol, it doesn't actually speak to any institution with regards to the opportunities that, for resolution. So as CIArb Africa and as chairs of, maybe we should, arising from this meeting today, maybe we should have a committee to look at how to work with AFTA to leverage on CIArb, because what I had discussed with Willie was to engage with AFTA and then also promote, perhaps have a directory of arbitration and then provide, support in terms of institutional support with regards to resolving trade disputes within AFTA. That is a very huge opportunity that I think we should leverage, and I want you, Prof, to to drive that, going forward. Let's have a committee and let's engage with AFTA and see how we can leverage on the opportunities that AFTA, provides. Now, to the question that you asked me with regards to institutions of arbitration within Africa, that takes us back to where we started from. Arbitration should be driven essentially by the private sector, because international arbitration is a private resolution mechanism for resolving investment and commercial disputes. So the question to ask is, how many of our institutions in Africa are private sector driven? How many of them are? Now, we take example from ICC, LCIA, the Singapore Center, the Hong Kong Center. Those are private sector driven centers. And you can't run a center as an appendage of government and expect for the center to thrive. It's not going to thrive. You can't run a center, that survives on subvention from government and expect the center to thrive. It cannot thrive. And I use a very good example here. Unfortunately, it's a bad one. I was in Lagos 2 weeks ago for international arbitration. And our center was one of the very huge centers in Lagos. And when that center was established, it was, in fact, our branch at some point had our office at the center. And it was, very nice, looking very, very attractive. Quite frankly, I lost my way trying to locate the center. And eventually I got to the place. The services, I'm not sure that is something anybody will be proud of. And we finished over 2 weeks now. Transcription is not being produced. And we paid for it. So that is a center that should have been a rallying point for other centers within Nigeria and all of that. So African arbitration centers should perhaps take another look at their modus operandi and to readjust themselves and to begin to do it the way it's supposed to be done. Every country must not have a center. Perhaps it might be regional centers, for instance, East Africa, for instance. We can have a hub somewhere in Nairobi or somewhere in Kigali or somewhere in Kampala, and the center begins to run efficiently and effectively. But if we keep having every country having is good for the optics, but I mean, are they thriving the way they should thrive? Are they living up to their potentials? The way they should. The way they should. That is something that we should think about. And then again, with the bottlenecks we see in the way some of the centers operate, I'm not sure efficiency and effectiveness should be the hallmark of a private sector driven center. I mean, it shouldn't be tied to bottlenecks, of government. And then also the outcome of the award from any center is what gives the center its image and reputation. Everybody goes to ICC because you know that ICC awards can stand scrutiny anywhere you take it. So our centers, to be able to have such quality outputs, should also have quality pool of arbitrators. People should not appoint people because of sentiments. You should go for the best. We have, like Madam Shola said, there are a lot of very good arbitrators across Africa, from South Africa to East Africa to West Africa, everywhere. So we should begin to maximize the quality we have and expertise we have. And then, of course, also technology. Prof, we are one at the moment, which we have concluded. You join from Kenya, I join from Nigeria, somebody joins from Kigali, and it's gone well so far. And so we should do a lot more of that across Africa. So the centers in Africa should please try to find ways of collaborating with themselves and perhaps even having, pulling together, and operating, collaboratively rather than standing alone and then not making the mark. For instance, I don't know of any center in Africa that has a caseload of up to 1,000, perhaps after 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years of existence. I don't know of any center in Africa that is driven essentially by the private sector. I don't know of any center in Africa, perhaps apart from the Cairo, center. I don't know of any center that survives without government subvention. I don't know, and that is not the way to run a center. That is not the way to run a center. So we should start thinking of how to perhaps change our business models with regards to arbitration centers across Africa. I'm aware many of our centers have, very good rules. Their rules are up to date, but in terms of efficiency, I'm looking to see how LEAC has a lot of promise, from Zambia. I'm looking to see how LEAC. Okay, somebody says I'm seeing. Okay, Madam Susan says LEAC is privately funded. It's good to hear that, and I believe that would be, a good thing to have, going forward. Thank you very much, Prof.
Those are very, very great thoughts, Trustee. And I think very solid critique when we talk about how our centers are established, the business models that they are using, and the prospects of rethinking that, including through some kind of a joint collaboration across the continent. I think you've also stirred up what Madam Shola had mentioned, that we need to turn our eyes within and not always look from outside when we're thinking about international commercial arbitration and what roles practitioners working this continent can play amongst ourselves. Most importantly, I think, Trustee, you've turned us to the last part of our engagement. We've got 20 minutes to the hour. And that is about concrete actions that we can take. One of them you suggested as a product of the conversation you had with the emeritus Kenya branch chair, Willie Mtubwa, RIP, is a joint effort to engage the CFTA. There are provisions, there is a silence on the provisions on how those arbitrators are appointed. Is it something that the chairs can do? I'd like to open this up now to the other panelists. I'm also looking out for questions and comments around concrete action plans that can be taken. Let me recognize the presence of the chair of the South Africa branch, very good friend of ours, Henklo. Karibu sana, welcome, really good to have you with us. We are talking about concrete actions that can be taken. So whether it is in terms of perceptions on the continent, we've talked a lot about that, whether it's in terms of the impediments, travel impediments, what really can we do seated here as a branch chairs as far as collaboration is concerned to make Africa a hub. And I will probably open that space, parting shots, better late than never, to Chairman South Africa branch, Henklo. What are your comments? What can we really do as the chairs of CIArb across Africa? Concrete actions.
Lisa, I currently have two issues that I want to deal and have been dealing with in arbitration. And I listened to our Africa trustee say that there should be some collaboration between entities and also with reference to AFSA. Now, AFSA has a wonderful footprint and a wonderful set of rules, and it's exposed into the east, and it has a fairly good infrastructure. Now, the thinking is one should use that infrastructure and develop with that infrastructure. And with the CEO of AFSA and Stanley and Zamanda, and I think you all know Stanley, we've been looking into a project of expanding the AFSA footprint into Southern Africa with reference to administered arbitration. And with that, the Chartered Institute is developing on the same platform, doing ad hoc arbitrations. So I take the point, and I think it's a wonderful point, that we should move forward and collaborate and go across borders. Now, once we have that, I don't think that we should be limiting ourselves just merely to Southern Africa, but I think more importantly, we should look into the whole of Africa. And if we can run complete collaborations, that would even be the better. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I find that we deal with issues on a high level, but how do we capture disputes? And what is our stock in trade? Our stock in trade is, one, our people who can arbitrate and sit in arbitrations as arbitrators. And our second stock of trade is the disputes. Now, how do we attract those disputes? And the most important thing, I think, is we should ensure that in our own jurisdictions, our arbitration clauses refers to our jurisdictions. And we should do away with the foreign clauses that says it goes to London, or it goes to Singapore, or it goes to Paris, wherever. The minute that we have those clauses in our domestic contracts on an international basis, we can ensure that those disputes are attracted to us.
So there is a second concrete proposal. Instead of talking about it, we can do something through contract.
Yes.
Of course, there is another layer to that discussion, because we don't, a lot of those disputes, provisions of contract are in the hands of council, whether that's State Council and the Attorney General's office, So I almost get the sense, Hank, that there's a lot of awareness raising, outreach efforts with those specific offices
Absolutely.
to find out, you know, what can be done to change the tide so that the closures are not the usual centers in the north and the east. Is there maybe some success stories of what has happened in South Africa when it comes to your engagement with the bar, with the legal councils in changing the paradigm in that regard?
Well, we have active programs running through AFSA and the Chartered Institute to ensure that within the bar structure, we create awareness. So what we have domestically is a thing called the Advocates for Transformation. And it's a parallel bar structure that has developed. And through that, we've now created committees on the AFSA group, or the Advocates for Transformation grouping. And that's now going from domestically in Johannesburg. We want to roll that out into international. And through that process, we are creating awareness within our bar and within the bars generally in South Africa as to the absolute need to run issues by way of arbitration. But with that, we are also engaging with external entities and not necessarily government. Entities like our corporate council of directors, companies themselves, bodies with reference to engineering entities, to ensure that they are aware of us and what we can do. And within our judicial system, I found that we have general bottlenecks. Now, if you have in Johannesburg, which is the seat of international arbitration in our country, if you run a matter into the High Court, we've found that it's going to take you a year to get through the High Court on a review or an enforcement or one of those issues. And we've been actively engaged with the judiciary to now fast track arbitrations through the courts. And our judiciary has been very helpful in the process. So now we have commercial court protocols that says that if any arbitration comes into our system, we need to run it through the commercial court in Johannesburg on an expedited basis. So now we have the buy-in of the judiciary, and if the courts are involved, we can run it expeditiously. Yes, there is an engagement with government, and we have wonderful contacts through our colleagues in AFT and with the various law societies and the Law Society of South Africa. And we're engaging with them to ensure that the awareness is out there. And then, of course, there is engagement on various corporate structures. So the idea is not necessarily to run it into government, because government is a very important partner, but not all international type contracts have to do with government. And the minute that we get our arbitration clause sold to corporate entities, sold to the law firms that draft these contracts, sold to government, and they know who we are, what we are, and what we can present, and they are sure that through our African network, we're all collaborating with one another. We have the infrastructure wherever it is. I mean, nowadays, what does one really need to run a good, proper arbitration? You need a great internet connection. And if you have that and you have the proper equipment, then you can run it. And I've uploaded just now the AFSA remote hearing protocol, which we wrote about 5 years ago, that deals with that and what are the technology requirements. So once we do these things, we've got to ensure that from our own perspective, we are geared for it. So it's do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the technology? What do we present around our hub? So in hub marketing, let's talk about my jurisdiction. We as the Chartered Institute have ad hoc facilities, so we don't necessarily have to cater for that. But what we ensure is that we have the use of facilities within our environment in Sandton, in Cape Town, and Durban, and we have the infrastructure that we can make available. Not necessarily always ours, but contracted out infrastructure, contracted out transcribing services, contracted out lists of hotels. So I can go to a party and say, if you want to arbitrate in Sandton, this is where you can sit, this is where you can stay, this is the infrastructure, these are the support teams that can assist you in the process. And this is the list of our arbitrators. Now I'm not trying to commit myself only to South African arbitrators. And this is the thinking about SADC. And I've invited some SADC members to join our website in South Africa. So they're on the website. We know who they are. And when parties look at our website, they can say, well, here is someone. I need X, Y, and Z. I know of an entity in Botswana the other day that approached an appointment body. And they said, well, we want an arbitrator, independent. The entity then went and appointed someone from Botswana to hear the dispute in Botswana. And that caused major difficulties because the appointment body wasn't aware of our wonderful members right through Africa. And if I look at the members here, and Sula, I'm again pointing fingers at you. We have wonderful people running these things. Our Africa trustee, yourself. We must just market ourselves. And I don't think we should necessarily market ourselves on a branch by branch by branch level. I think we should now open up and say, here's the website for Chartered Institute Africa. And on that list, we should put our arbitrators so that they know who we are and we can present themselves and ourselves to the market. And so it's marketing, creating awareness, embedding ourselves into contracts with arbitration clauses, marketing our structures and the support structures around it. So people can come to us and we can give them a one-stop shop.
Wow, fantastic. Very well said, Hank. Trustee, there is a second concrete point that we can take forward. Unified website with African practitioners. It's pretty straightforward, nothing holding us back. And then a few examples from the South African CIArb branch on how they've worked strategic partnerships. I like what they've done with the bar. I have witnessed it and I've seen the collaboration every time we go for the Johannesburg Arbitration Week. Maybe those are lessons that we should be taking to other parts of the world. Shola, I've seen your hand. Parting shots. We are discussing how to take all of this forward. We've talked about contract, we've talked about developing capacity, a lot on law reform, a lot of aspects around infrastructure and how to deal with that. What are some of the low-lying fruits? The chairs are here. They would like to leave this session with something that they have to do. What would that be for you? Welcome, Shola.
We can't
I
hear.
think you're muted. You're muted, Shola. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. I said, I'm so happy to hear what Henk had to say, which was like reiterating something Dr. Madumeri had said. I think one of the low-hanging fruits is to see how we can, well, it's good that we're actually all talking together now, but now let's see if we can take it a step further and come together and have maybe a committee, maybe a council, something by which we can all now start working together in Africa, working together. Let's start with little steps, training, a form of a disputes appointment panel, something like that, where we can work together. I mean, there's so many things that we're all having it, all over the place. I mean, maybe once a year or every 2 years, we can have a CIArb conference, a CIArb Africa conference. We once had that when the CIArb celebrated 100 years. That was a long while back. I think it was 2015 or so. And we had a beautiful specialized conferences together, you know, a conference on AI, a conference on things that are of use to all of us. And I don't see what is not, but maybe smaller, specialized conferences. I mean, sports arbitration. Why can't we as CIArb Africa be doing? And there's so many other industries where I think we can work together. And I think that's a low-hanging fruit to start with. They don't even have to be the big ones. Let's just start with small conferences that we can do things together. We may even start with a virtual conference, even though I always prefer physical conferences. You know, even for some of the reasons we have mentioned, you know, in a virtual, don't have this opportunity to network. And we keep saying visibility. A lot of it also comes from networking. How do we know ourselves? You know, how do we meet ourselves, know ourselves? You know, let's have all these smaller meetings together. And I believe that that is one step. I put up my hand because when Dr. Madre was talking about these institutions, you know, I wanted to say that I think another thing we need to do is to start partnering together. And even through these conferences, we may be able to partner together. Let's even do one thing together physically, small thing, and see how that goes.
Wow, wow. Shola, as always, you really nailed the head. So going out of here, I think it's clear the idea of some kind of smaller committee to explore harmonization. That includes joint trainings. We've had such rich conversations with Shola in this area. Trustee, we've also spoken about that conference. The time is right. And there's no better way than using some of those forums for visibility. This is a time that people will see the continent has so much to offer. Thank you, thank you. Parting shots. We are on the last leg. Amy, your parting shot. Concrete actions, things that we can do. My undertaking is to sum this up to the chairs that are present and to make sure that this conversation doesn't die here. I think we can develop a rich rubric that slowly we can take on forward in implementation. Yes, Amy, Chair, Rwanda, karibu sana.
Thank you so much. Actually, I don't have a lot. I could first start by what we have experienced, CIArb Rwanda and CIArb Kenya, only this month. Through our collaboration as sister branches, we're able to receive trainers from Kenya for a training led by one of our institutions in Kigali. This was really very key for us to have people coming from Kenya to train Rwandans on finance sector, which is a way we can build up this the collaboration that we need. Another way, since our mandate as CIArb is in capacity building, certification trainings and whatever, I'm looking at the youth and I'm thinking about what we can have as a cross-border mentorship exchange program, so that we can have young members trained from one angle to the other in a collaborative way. Raising up our capacity in that regard. Another thing I'm trying to look at, it's like we don't have the same experience. When I see like where we have centers that have developed, and even some branches having like the appointment structure and things going forward, Maybe we can do some shadowing also, where young practitioners can receive experience from those who are ahead, and then help each other in building up each other in that way, but also to pave it with these MOUs and yeah,
happening. We don't need permission. Training across borders. There is a great experience. We should do more of that. Use a lot of resources in Nigeria, here in Kenya, just the way we've seen Rwanda doing. And that, I think, the idea of mentorship, we've also talked a lot about that with Shola some time back, whether we could explore transnational mentorship programs with the younger people, and then shadowing. So that's a very, very good point. International exposure and shadowing across territories. Thank you. We are on our parting shots. Hank, you started us off. We've had from Shola, from Amy. Muleba, karibu sana, Chair Zambia. Your parting shots, concrete actions that we can take. You spoke a lot about opportunities. What do we do about them? Thank you.
So mine should be even easier, because I think I had a few of these notes which most people have gone over. The one which I would want to emphasize, though, is writing. I think we can explore the opportunity of writing amongst our branches. And this could be articles where we have, members from Kenya write an article with a member from Zambia, a member from Nigeria, with South Africa. And the idea here would be that you'd be demonstrating expertise from two different jurisdictions, comparisons, and what's the best practices. But also, I think it goes towards helping visibility. We've spoken quite a bit about visibility and demonstrating our expertise. So we keep saying, how do we put ourselves out there as an expert in this field or this practice area? So one way could be, let's explore joint articles. And I know, for example, Kenya, you have your journal, Zambia, which I do a newsletter, Nigeria have something. Are we able to have a newsletter or a journal that cuts across or branches, or our branches, and then has those joint articles? So that's something to then consider. That would be my parting shot for us to all consider.
And it's a brilliant one at that. I was in a conference one, not too far in the distance. I think it's the London Dispute Week, International Dispute Week, and conversations around how visibility is key for what you call the African voice as a thought leader on what's happening on the continent when it comes to dispute resolution. It's a huge challenge. We need to see how, I think UCT has been exploring. Maybe Hank might want to follow up that. Last conversations we had with UCT was about how we could produce an African journal in arbitration, very, very specific. And it requires quite a bit of thought, but they may be in a place to provide that platform. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Zambia. And then I invite you, the trustee, to make a closing remarks. I think you can see my Emerita have remarks, excellent discussion.
Yeah.
He was recently a part of the recent African Chief Justice of the ADR Forum. This is at a continental level, and I think you've read that. It says we now need to start thinking how to align with a lot of these initiatives that are happening on the continent. And then, of course, I think don't leave out the last comment by Herman Kunda. I need concrete actions to make sure that we don't look like we're overlapping and competing and making our relationship more archaic than progressive. Africa Trustee, parting shots from you, bearing in mind those two very.
Yes. So thank you very much, Prof. I am very happy today because for me, this is a dream that is unfolding. When I see the collaboration and the energy among ourselves across Africa, this for me is the right way to go. But before I proceed, please allow me to recognize, I've seen my Lord Justice, Honorable Justice Patel, of the Supreme Court of Zambia. She's on this call, and she's one of the very senior members of our branch in Zambia, and she has been there and been supporting the branch. So, my Lord, thank you very much for having time to join us today. I've also seen a very senior member of, in fact, our chair emerita, one of the former chairs of Zambia branch, Engineer Suzanne Ratra, very senior member and very prominent arbitrator, one of the chartered arbitrators from our branch in Zambia. Madam Susan, thank you very much for joining us. And of course, I've also seen the senior counsel, John Ohaga, and other senior members and everyone who has come here today. Thank you very much for coming. Now, Prof, the ball is in your court. Then you must now begin to harness all these views that has been expressed, from the view expressed by Hank to the gentleman who wrote something, there about the MOU signed by, with AFTA and CIArb. We must know how to harness all of that to project CIArb and project our members within Africa. And the view and suggestion of Hank, is top notch with regards to having a website that puts together a list of African arbitrators. And of course, the conference, you and I had a conversation around this conference, even if a few days ago. That is something that that we should do, and that's something that will happen very, very soon. So just to say thank you very much for putting this together, and let this be a continuing effort, as a way of setting the agenda and putting CIArb on the map within our region. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Africa Trustee, Dr. Chikwendo Magumere. Very, very big thanks to the chairs that have been present. Madam Shola, Chair Nigeria, Labour, Chair Zambia. Hank, I think you were 1 hour behind with the time zones. Chair South Africa, and Amy, Chair of Rwanda. A lot of this will be captured, not just in a bulletin, but in action points for all the chairs to take forward. It has been a true pleasure listening to each one of you. I'm sure. Yes, yes.
Prof,
yes.
Before we end, we must thank you. We must thank you for putting this together, for coming up with this idea, for excellent moderating. Thank you very much, because I know how much you put into making it happen. So we can't thank everybody without thanking you for making it happen. Yes.
Thank you so much. That is so kind of you, Chair Nigeria Shola, who always brings a smile everywhere she walks in the CIArb gatherings. Thank you again to all of you. It wouldn't have been what it is without your presence. We recognize the seniors in our midst. Milady, thank you very much for joining us all the way from Zambia. Justice Patel. Suzanne, great to have you with us. Quite a number of other names that I may not have time to mention. At this stage, allow me to hand over to our CEO just to make a few announcements on various programs. Welcome, Evelyn. Good to have you with us. Asanteni sana. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to our distinguished panelists, as well as everyone who has joined us today for what has been such an enlightening event and discussion. And I'll not take much of your time since we're already 11 minutes past the hour. What I would want to mention is that just to put across what it is that we've been discussing, that partnership, that Africa needs to come together to be able to achieve all that we've talked about. And as CIArb Kenya, we are not just saying that, we are actually putting it into practice. And it started with this conference, which is scheduled for the 5th to the 9th of October this year. We're calling it the Takuka Conference, the Takuka 2026 Conference, which is in partnership with the African Arbitration Institutions. And this conference essentially enhances the conversation we've been having today. We are talking of Africa decisions, or Africa decides, sovereignty, innovation, and the future of dispute resolution. the fundamental underlying message for this conference is that Africa is ready, Africa has the competence, Africa has the resources to be able to be the arbitration and dispute resolution hub of the world.